Hey, this is Keith from Data Beats Opinion. Thanks again for joining us. My guest today is Matt Giovanisci. He is from Money Lab and focuses really on the side of marketing that I think a lot of people don't pay attention to or just kind of don't look at as much. And really what that is kind of this no BS marketing. And I know that people throw around the no BS marketing a lot and they're like, oh, we're not BS marketers. Download our PDF to see how we're not a BS marketer.
Right.
And it's kind of self-defeating at that point. And Matt has talked a lot about how he is. Well, I guess, Matt, I'll let you go into it. How do you define yourself as a no BS marketer in, honestly, an area that's so filled with BS?
You know, I don't know. What is BS, right? I think what you just mentioned is we're honest. We're straightforward. We cut to the chase. We're no BS. Download our PDF. Yeah. I think, there's this weird sort of balance about honesty, right? There's this honest marketing approach. And I think there's a lot of companies that do honest marketing and it works very, very well. But some of that can be faked, right? You can fake this honesty, like, oh, we're this humble company. I'm this humble blogger. And what I do is it's not that. I'm not doing it on purpose. It's just, I'm just that way as a person. Like, you know, I kind of wear my thoughts and opinions and emotions on my sleeve. If you hung out with me and you came over and you're like, hey, how are you doing? I literally answer, I'm like, you know what? My back hurts.
Yeah.
I have a
I got
hangnail
this thing on my foot. You got to see this thing.
You got to see. I'm really in a lot of pain right now, but hey, let's crack a beer. I don't give a shit. So it's just like, I people are like, well, that was too much information. I didn't need all that. And so when I did money, like, you know, I have other brands. I have this brand called swimuniversity.com. I have a brand called brewcabin.com. I used to have a brand called roastycoffee.com. I run a podcast called Listen Money Matters at listenmoneymatters.com, which is a personal finance show. And all of these things combined sort of birthed Money Lab. And Money Lab is it's kind of like my home base where I can, you know, I have these hypotheses about online business and I have these, you know, thoughts that I want to put to the test, and I do it in a very extreme way. So it's like my most recent experiment as an example of what I do at Money Lab. I have two of them. One is I have this idea. So somebody sent me this post that was like, if you on Apple Podcasts, like the whole podcasting network in Apple, there are a handful of categories. Like they just came out with these new categories, and there's a handful of them that have very low competition. And if you want to start a podcast, like maybe get into these low competition categories.
Right.
And one of them was swimming, and the other one was chemistry. They were the two lowest.
Okay.
And so my buddy was like, hey, maybe you should start a Swim University podcast since I run a pool site, you know, kind of related to swimming, but not the sport of swimming. But I was like, And I was like, that's not a bad idea. And I read all these articles about this whole low competition category thing in Apple. And I'm like, you know what? All right. I have the ripe sort of brand. And I know how to podcast. Like it's something that it's definitely within my wheelhouse.
Right.
And so I'm like, I'm going to create a podcast and I'm going to do this and I'm going to document the whole thing. And I have like this 3-stage test to see if this is a viable marketing channel for my brand. And I give all the stats and I give all the money and I give every little friggin' thought and step that I did to create this podcast. And like, I film videos on how I edit the show, how I publish it, just kind of like almost oversharing.
Right.
And I don't say to people on Money Lab, I don't go, I'm doing this and this is the way it should be done. Like, this is how you make more money on the internet. It's like, no, I'm not an advice giver. I don't like giving advice because what the hell do I know? Right. You know, I'm just out there doing this stuff in public. And sometimes it works out and it's great. And sometimes it fails miserably and that sucks. And that's the thing that I'm willing to say that most people aren't, which is as an online entrepreneur who fails a lot, I don't say, oh, failing is good because what I learned from this was X.
Right.
And now I'm a better person. No. At the time of failing, it friggin' sucks. And I don't pull it like it's like, yeah, maybe I learned something, but that's not what's going on in my head.
Other than don't do that again, right?
Yeah. Okay, learned your lesson. You touch the stove, it's hot.
Right.
Don't avoid the stove. So yeah, that's something I'm working on now. I'm also working on a Pinterest experiment or a challenge really, where I want to test this new marketing channel. Will it get me more traffic? Will it make me more money? Right. And so I'm bulk creating 100 pins all by myself and then scheduling them out and then documenting that process plus the results of that experiment or challenge.
And this is something, I mean, this is really the whole reason I started the podcast as well, the whole data beats opinion idea, because you're exactly right. There are a lot of people out there that are like, I feel that they have an idea and they say, this is how the world works. And then they promote it as fact.
Yes.
Right. And especially in marketing, right? It's like, well, this is obvious. This is how people work. But if you actually do the test and you do what they say, it doesn't work out the same, right? Maybe they did do it, maybe they didn't. But having the transparency and that clarity of, hey, I don't know if this is going to work or not, but here's the things I'm doing, and walking through that structure and that flow with you, I think is 1,000 times more valuable, because it's not just the end result. Like, I don't know if you remember I think it was 8 or 10 years ago, when split testing was really becoming a thing. There was this PDF you could buy, and it was the top 50 split tests you should do right now. And one of them was, make the background of your sales page eggshell blue, and and it's like, it will increase conversion by 10%. I'm like, I don't think it will.
Yeah, no. And like, maybe it did for the one person.
Right, for that person.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's exactly, like what you talk about that, and specifically this podcasting experiment that I'm doing. I have a website that teaches people how to take care of their pools and hot tubs. And the lowest competition category happens to be swimming. So like, this experiment really only works for this very specific thing that I have.
Right. But now what you should do is start tweeting on Twitter. Everyone needs to jump into the swimming category.
Oh, yeah.
You have to have a swimming podcast.
Right.
I converted 400% by getting a swimming podcast.
Yeah. Or just saying a more general fact, which is podcasting is how you make money. Like, this is how it's done. Because I have Listen Money Matters is a very quote unquote successful podcast. We're talking 80,000 downloads an episode. This is a big one. This is a big show. It is still hard to make money on that show. It's a very difficult show to grow, and it's even on its own ecosphere, and it's very difficult to make money on. So podcasting is just like, even from the experiment that I'm doing, it's just a really sort of challenging medium to get into. But for me as a podcaster and somebody I studied broadcasting in high school, and I've always had like I guess a passion for it. This is, I could podcast literally all day and not feel fatigued. It's something
that's amazing.
I wish I could do more with this, but yeah.
And it has become a harder channel to do, because it has gotten so much easier to do podcasting. The equipment has gotten much more affordable. The editing has gotten much easier. It's getting more saturated by the day. But and then there's not a lot of discovery engines. I mean, Apple Podcasts is not a discovery engine the same way like YouTube would be, or Google even. But there's people that are trying. I mean, Spotify is certainly trying to be a discovery engine for podcasts, and so we'll see what happens. Yeah, and going back to the whole idea of sharing the process, I really see the marketers that I know and respect, and that I see very well respected in the industry, are the ones who share everything. So I'm thinking of people like Pat Flynn, of John Lee Dumas, of Ramit Sethi, of Patrick McKenzie, people who honestly said, hey, here's all my stuff. I'm sharing the process with you. It's all free. Yeah. And then what they monetize is let's do this for your company, either through consultancy like Patrick was doing, or through products that really dive into the 1, 2, 3s for a specific niche within that overall advice. But all of them, it's interesting because I work with a lot of marketers, and there's a lot that are flash in the pan of, hey, we're just going to make a lot of money. But then there's
Yeah.
also these that are like, it doesn't matter to make the money in the short run because we're building that base. We're stacking those bricks of, when people think of this problem, they come to me because they know I have everything, and I'm not BSing them, because you see every bit of the process.
Yeah.
There's never a point where you're like, oh, I don't know if John Lee Dumas is telling me the right stuff about podcasts, because he tells you every single thing.
Yeah.
There is no behind the kimono. There is no hidden part of that.
True. And it actually really is a difficult space to be in. I personally find it difficult. I guess I shouldn't generalize, since we talked about that earlier, but somebody who's kind of, Money Lab is going to be 4 years old. I think it is 4 years old this month.
Oh, congrats.
Thank you. So and you'd be surprised to learn, I guess, the site gets, I only have about 1,400 subscribers. Most of those people came in when I had a viral moment my first year. I had a page that was called "Give Me Your Email Address," and if you go to moneylab.co/email, you can still see it. It's still up. And basically, what it was like a satirical blog post on the pop-up culture of like grabbing people's email addresses and stuff. And I got about 1,600 email addresses in a day from that. And
the irony.
And it's right, exactly. But it's been kind of that same, 14 to 1,600 people that have been just kind of rotating, either on and off the list, or they've been with me the last 4 years, or they, because I constantly trim and clean the list. And I haven't really grown as far as like the traffic to the site, because none of my articles are really SEO driven, even though that's kind of my wheelhouse. Like, SEO is what I do, but I don't do it at Money Lab because I'm not a how-to company. I'm not a brand that's like, hey, I'm going to show you how to podcast. I'm going to show you how to do this. My products certainly are, because I do have courses where, the course that I just launched was about page speed. And I talk about page speed constantly throughout my products and throughout my just being on Twitter and whatever and videos, but I've never done a really technical, how-to guide. But I'm not going to publish a how-to guide because, again, like that is the behind the scenes of what I do. I do talk about it publicly, and I will share those experiments. Like I think I did a public experiment about page speed, and then it's like, oh, everyone was like, you need to make a course on this. And I basically just bend to their will. If my audience says like, please make something about this, I will. So yeah, and it's like, you do it enough times, you show people that you're capable of doing it, and then you can build the product behind it. But I find it difficult to grow Money Lab because of what you just said. Is like, I pretty much just kind of just show everybody everything. And there's no SEO. There's really no discovery engine besides like most of my audience comes from doing things like this, being on other people's shows, or social media, or even better, or I guess even worse for me, Slack channels. Because people go, look at what this guy is doing. I don't see that. No one praises. They kind of share it privately. It's all really word of mouth, organic. And what's great about that is I have a really awesome audience. Like, it's so good. Right. But it's so small and it doesn't grow. But, I guess everybody that I think isn't that, and that was who I was going for. I wasn't trying to go for entrepreneurs and newbies in the industry. I was going for people who have been doing this and go, hey, I like this guy.
Right. And I think that's, I was having this discussion, I think a day or so ago, but I was talking about the fact that probably 8-10 years ago, you want a huge list. Like, everyone's just like, get the list. It doesn't matter where they're from, because there's low competition. Yeah. And you're going to get them to convert eventually.
And same with traffic. Traffic was the same exact way.
And it's really changed. And I see people with smaller, curated, fanatical lists outperforming people who have million person lists. Definitely on the lead value, but even sometimes on the revenue value, because there are people that when you say, hey, I have this new course, that it's an instant buy. There's no thought process that goes into it. It's like, Matt just put out something that I want to see. Now I'm going to purchase it. Right.
And that's exactly what happens. Yeah. It's like, it's real. It's like that 1,000 true fans thing.
Yeah.
It's really what I'm building. And but everyone says you should do SEO for Money Lab. And I honestly, I won't, because one, I tried. One day I sat down and I was like, okay, I did this whole what was it, podcasting? It was some process. Oh, it was so I've done on Money Lab, there's probably like 3 or 4, I'll call them challenges, where I built a digital product, a course, within 3 to 7 days, something like that. There's different ones. And I was like, you know what? I have this idea. I'm going to create a method, because it's Money Lab. I want it to be scientific. Okay, it's this branding thing. So I'm going to create a method where I basically take all 4 of these articles that I've done, this process that I've repeated 4 times, and distill it down into a recipe of some sort. It was pulling teeth for me, like, just to create that. And I go, oof, this doesn't feel right. This feels weird. To put this out on Money Lab, I'm sure people would love it. And I still have it. It's still like, I'm just in a document and I have some ideas for it. But to put that on Money Lab as a how-to to kind of get search engine traffic just feels wrong. Yeah. Just for what? And I want to control the Money Lab brand. I love the fact that even somebody like yourself, who comes on and says, like, I think what you're doing is refreshing. In this space, you don't hear that very often. No, so I think, like, and hearing that is like, cool, man. I'm like, it is a brand. And I say this as, I want to call myself a creative, quote unquote. I want to call myself an artist, quote unquote. I think I'm a person who creates. I don't necessarily call myself an artist. However, Money Lab is sort of that blend between business and art, where I can really be myself. Like, one of my challenges was to create a rap album in 30 days. And one of the I still say that it's like the proudest I am of any experiment. And even though it failed, it's a failed experiment, or it was a failed challenge, because I think I lost like $20 on the whole thing. But I still reference that as my favorite thing I ever did, because it's like, it was, just like super fun. It was very much me. And, but those things, my friend called it a list burner. He's like, no one is going to follow you while you make a rap album. And like, all these online business people don't give a shit that you're making a rap album in 30 days, like, and I go, well, that's, I mean, people followed me through it, and then moved on to a Pinterest challenge or a podcasting one, or who knows, like, whatever the next one will be.
Right. And there's something about that authenticity that I think, even if they're not going to follow you through that particular process, it creates a more authentic connection to you. It's like, oh, Matt's doing this weird rap thing. I'm not really interested in it, but he's doing a weird rap thing. Like,
that word authenticity, right? I feel like it's like, authenticity and honesty are different. Would you agree? Right. So people can be, quote unquote, honest in their marketing, right? Where they go, I think like Spirit Airlines is pretty good with this. And like, there's a bunch of bigger companies that kind of explore this, like, hey, we're self-aware. We know who we are, and we say this, blah, blah, blah. But that in and of itself isn't authentic. That is actually, that's a crafted message. It's a crafted message, right? I think the Wendy's Twitter account is, everyone loves the Wendy's Twitter account. Yeah, but it's like, I mean, it's not authentic.
No, it's honest.
It's honest.
It's snarky, but it's not authentic.
It's not authentic. And so one of the things that happened to me, and it's just like a trajectory that I don't know if it could be replicated, but I don't have a college education. And when I was in high school, I graduated D's and C's, skin of my teeth kind of person. I mostly failed English classes, and The classes I failed the most were English and graphic design, which ironically
which is exactly what you do now.
It was exactly what I do now. And so, but I think what that did, weirdly, as a byproduct, is I really never learned how to write formally.
Mm-hmm.
I was obviously taught it, but I couldn't.
Right.
I was taught, but I just ignored it. Grammar, semicolons, no thank you.
Especially high school grammar, yeah.
And then moving into college, I went for 2 weeks in a community college, and an English teacher and I got into an argument, and I dropped out. I was like, screw this. Like, this is stupid. I'm being I was doing creative writing in an English composition class and was getting graded on how much my humor wasn't funny to her. So to me, I'm like, well, hold on a second. So I know at this point that my writing, at least I'm writing something of that's interesting, right? I just didn't know grammar. And so when I write, I get a lot of praise for my writing, even though I'm incredibly self-conscious about it because I've failed so much at it. And I've been told by many people that I'm a terrible writer. I don't think they meant that as you're not good at conveying your thoughts and feelings. Right. It's you're bad at using semicolons, and you should just, And so I learned
you don't have the technical skill, but you are communicating in a way that conveys emotion, conveys the desire, and what you want to accomplish with it.
Yeah, and I only know how to be myself, and so I've always written stream of consciously, and now that I've, as I got older, I'm like, you know what, I should probably learn grammar. And I just picked up how to use periods more often. Like, hey, if you don't know how to use a semicolon and you barely know how to use a comma, maybe just short sentences, right. maybe do the old man of the sea
approach. Which is ironically perfect for marketing. So it's like,
yeah, really. And then so I was like, oh, I could use only, like, I challenged myself to only use periods. And then as I started doing that, my writing became like what I could do in stream of consciousness, where my sentences were run-ons and just awful. I was able to now take a sentence that was multiple lines and condense it down into a single line or less. Right. And all of a sudden it was just much more punchier, and I was still being funny. I was still being myself. And so I think the authenticity that maybe comes through at Money Lab has a lot to do with the lack of formal education in writing that I've had, that sort of morphed into, oh, he only knows how to write as he talks because that's the only way. And I do have I know that, like, I'm a talker and I'm an extrovert, so that's helpful too. And then it's just like, now that I have this like grammar education, this slight grammar education that I just taught myself, it's like now I go back and I clean it up, and it's just, oh, now it reads like he's not an idiot. So it's like he's authentic and also not an idiot.
It's interesting because when I went to college, the first thing that my English teacher said is that the first 6 months we are going to be unlearning every single thing you learned in high school because it was all BS.
That's awesome.
And because I remember I was in English class in high school, senior year, and we had to write, I forget what we had to write, but I put a quote from Star Wars in it. I said, "Luke, I am your father." And there was a rule that you could not use first person in your essay, even in a quote. And she had crossed it out and said, "Luke, I am one's father."
Ooh.
And I got an F on it because I had used the word "I" in a quote.
That was in high school?
That's senior year of high school. That just kind of sums up like
how bad it is. Yeah.
True. And it all depends on the teacher, but
sure.
Yeah. But I get it. It's like, I understand it doesn't teach you how to write. It teaches you how to be pedantic with the technical parts of writing, which are very important.
Yeah.
But it's missing the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
Right?
I've heard Tim Ferriss talk about how when he was writing his book, he was writing to sound smart, and then when he ended up like writing to a friend, which was more casual, it ended up his writing got a lot better and he found his voice, quote unquote. Right. I don't think I've ever had that moment of finding my voice. I think I've always just had it. And I actually worked in reverse, where I learned grammar to sort of kind of like contain my voice, and to make my voice a lot easier to digest as you're reading it, instead of reading like sentences with multiple commas, and it's like, oh, he's very succinct, and
it's just Hemingway crossed with
it's Hemingway,
comics,
yeah,
right?
right, yeah.
No punctuation, short sentence.
Yeah, it's like Hemingway with terrible with more childish prose, I guess. But yeah, I think that authenticity is really difficult. I don't really see it a lot. I look for it because I have a BS meter for sure. Everything that we're going through right now, to be topical, I can't be on Twitter. I'm just like,
it's horrible.
It's like, you're not a doctor and I'm not a doctor. But
right.
if Google has a core update, and that's the crisis that everyone's going through, maybe I have something to say on that, and I'll be public. But this is not one of those things.
Can you imagine if Google did a core update right now, and just how everyone would just
melt? Yeah. Thankfully, they did it in January and not now. Yeah, that's a tangent for sure, and it's something I've been thinking a lot about. But I don't want to.
But again, it is a tangent. But I think it goes back to the authenticity, because there's a very clear, or not clear, it's a very unclear divide of what you see as well as how you are perceived, right? Yeah. And I think there are companies who are like, let's take advantage of this. There are definitely companies that are like, we want to do something to help, but we're not sure how.
Right.
And then there's companies like, let's try something, but then you have to weigh,
yeah,
okay, are we seeing, like, for example, Disney released, I think, like 3 movies, including Frozen 2, 3 months early. Like, it's still in theaters, and they were like, there's kids at home, let's release it.
Yeah.
And it's like, where does that fall?
Where does that,
right?
Yeah.
Like,
so I know that everyone wants to be helpful, right? That's the thing. No, I don't think anyone's doing this with malicious intent, except for that one guy in Tennessee who hoarded all the
my home state. Thanks very much.
Yeah. Except for that guy. But yeah, I don't think anybody's being malicious. Like all these companies I mentioned, I don't. It's just it's an ethical dilemma that I've been kind of sitting down with. Like, hey, if this was 2001 or if this was 2008, or one of the things that I did about all of this was a week ago, actually 2 weeks ago, Andrew and I did an episode on Listen Money Matters about stock market fears, because this is when the stock market was dropping, and we were just we did a whole, how are we did it this way, where we said, let's not go out there and give advice, because again, like you shouldn't give advice on what people should do in the stock market. Everyone, obviously, like you have companies like Betterment or Acorns or whatever who are all putting out these statements like, hey, just keep cool, man, because this is all going to pass, and just don't pull your money out of our company. Right. Really, right? So they have an agenda, and our agenda was, well, what are we doing? Like, I think people just want to hear what other people are doing without being told what they should do. Like, if somebody said, hey, Matt, if anybody went on Twitter right now and said, hey, Matt, what are you doing during all this? I would tell them exactly what I was doing, because that's honest and it's authentic. But that would be the end of it. I wouldn't say, and you should too.
You need to jump all your stocks except for this one. Put all your money.
Like Tesla just got cut in half. Throw all your money in that because it's going to go back up. It's like, I don't know. I don't know the answer. But here's what I'm doing, and I practice this exact same thing on Money Lab, where I basically do all of the beginning parts. Like, here's what I'm doing. And then I stop short of saying, and you should too.
Right.
Because, I have the same rule with emails. If somebody emails me and says, hey, I have this idea for this business or this marketing strategy, what do you think? And my canned answer is this. And I literally write this out every time. I don't actually have a canned answer, but my answer is, I don't know, because I don't. Try it and then let me know how it works out, because that's exactly what I'm going to do. Right? Because how am I supposed to know if your idea is going to work or not? I don't even know if my ideas are going to work or not. Right. So, and I would be an idiot and an asshole if I went on and said, oh, that's a great idea. If you should absolutely do it, and then they fail. And then they fail miserably. Or I say that's going to work, and I give them this false hope because of because I've been doing this for 15 years. So I'm some sort of internet mentor to them that I don't even realize I am. And it's all of a sudden they're like, hey, this didn't work out. Like, screw you. And I'm like, but I'm the guru. I know everything. It's like, no, I don't know anything,
Right.
and neither does anyone else. And that's kind of my approach at Money Lab, which people find, again, refreshing. And I think that's the way that I educate myself. So when I go and look for courses or something to educate myself in some way, I love behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah.
I don't need you to talk. I just need you to show me how you're doing it. Now, I'm smart enough, or at least I hope I'm smart enough to realize that, like, by copying them, it's not going to be the same, because they have, if you're Pat Flynn, when Pat Flynn tells you to do something, remember that it's coming from a guy who teaches how to do this stuff. So when he does it, he's talking to you. He's talking to a different audience. He's got a real B2B audience, and it's huge, and it's a make money online thing. It's like, it's kind of a circle jerk where, when I tell you to do something and I'm doing it at Swim University and you have a coffee website, well, those two things don't necessarily fit together and they don't work. So it's the same thing. That's why I kind of avoid that whole, hey, this worked for me, so it absolutely has to work for you.
Right.
And even my courses are behind the scenes. They're not really educational. They're really just like, here's how I make my website faster. Here's how I do SEO.
And it's descriptive rather than prescriptive, because you are explaining the process, which means that if you see a part that doesn't work for you, you can change it. You can, and you understand the reasoning behind it. You're not being told, do this because it's the right thing. You're like, we're doing this because these factors.
Right.
And then you can extrapolate, okay, I don't have those factors, I probably don't need to do that. Where if you're following a course that is do A, B, C, D, without the explanation of why.
Yeah.
Like, it might talk about the theory, but not the specifics, then it becomes much less valuable.
And I think, like, to give Pat Flynn credit, I'm not here to shit on anybody. I hope I'm not. But because I admire all these people, like all these people we've mentioned. They're all cohorts of mine, and I'm constantly scrutinizing our own industry. But back in the day when I started Swim University, I had nothing. I was just a kid in his bedroom trying to figure out how to turn this site into a thing. And I was following Pat Flynn specifically. And a lot of what he was educating at the time was, hey, go onto forums, find your people, and promote to them, or ask them questions, and blah blah blah. And that was a big one. Go to where your audience already is, was the big, message. And I'm sitting here at Swim University going, like, where do pool owners hang out on the internet already?
Right.
There are no forums. There are no other blogs that are doing what I'm doing. So I kind of was like, well, this is really unfair, because he's crushing it, and I have to start everything from scratch. Right. And it was just that moment, or series and series of moments where I realized that Swim University was just so different than every other site out there. But then every other site I've created since then, I've realized the same thing, is that Money Lab is, even though it's like make money online kind of site, it's very similar to what Pat Flynn does. It's completely different than what Pat Flynn does. So every single site is unique. And I learned that and realized that, like, I can't take pure formulaic advice from somebody.
Right.
I basically just have to sit there and go, man, just show me how you do your Pinterest. Like, I don't don't yell at me and tell me how to do it. I just want to see you do it. And then I'll go, ooh, I like that piece.
I like that part. And I like this part.
And I put my own strategy together from that.
And Frank Kern's product launch formula.
No,
PLF?
I don't.
Okay, so
I know about what's his face? Who's the other guy that does that? Walker.
Everyone does it now.
Texas
Wait, who did
Walker?
I say? Who did I say?
You said Kern.
Sorry, I meant Walker.
What's his name? Paul Walker?
Jeff Walker.
Jeff Walker.
I'm going to blame it on COVID.
Okay.
My brain is half somewhere else.
Yes.
But we're looking at the PLF formula, which I think is honestly, when he launched it, it was just a completely revolutionary new way of doing launches And the whole idea was you are almost like priming the pump and talking about the product. You're giving away videos, and he specifically said like 3 weeks of videos, in order to get people ready for this product that you're then going to launch, right? You're priming the pump for this. And it was brilliant. And I think the core of that is still a brilliant strategy. And it's what I recommend to everyone I talk to. The problem was that everyone saw this and they're like, 3 videos, that's it.
Yeah.
And they're like, 1 video, 2 video, 3 video sales page.
Yes.
And you can tell a PLF launch coming from like 8 miles away now.
Yeah.
Because as soon as that first video comes up and it has 2 more coming soon, you're like, okay, I'm going to be sold on something.
Right. And that's only if you're launching something. You know, like we at Swim University, we just have a product for sale. And I've, again, this is another example of like, I did all this. I followed these formulas because I'm like, which one's going to work? I don't know. The one that worked for me was basically somebody signs up to your email list and immediately just give them a discount code and they'll immediately buy it. They're just impulse. It's an impulse product. And it was just knowing like, oh, my audience. One of the weirdest things that I found out. So I was reading way back in the day, Nathan Barry's book before he had ConvertKit called Authority, right? And it was about writing ebooks, right? So I was like, cool. He got me to write my second ebook from it. And in the book, he was like, you can charge $50, $60, $100 for an ebook. And I was like, oh, wow. I never thought of that. Like, you price it according to value. So I go ahead and price my PDF, my ebook at $50 and put it on Swim University. And I have traffic, I have people come in and I advertise it the way, the same way I do now. No one bought it. Like, it was like, the sales were so low. And I go, well, what the hell's going on? I just kept lowering the price until I hit the price of an actual book. And all of a sudden it took off because my audience happens to be 40, 50, 60-year-olds who understand what a book costs. They go to Barnes and Nobles. They remember bookstores. But as soon as you try to sell them a $60 to $70 book, they're like, no, what is this? Like, I'm not in college anymore. So it was just a disconnect.
And that audience, as well as that positioning of it, is so important. So 37 Signals, who did Basecamp, they have a book called, and I'm just blanking on all of these right now. Getting Started, I think.
Getting Started is excellent.
It is a wonderful book. It's a actual book. You buy it on Amazon. It's I think $17 or $25. I can't remember. It's a nice book. They had released it on their website as a free PDF. And you would not believe the vitriol that went their way. They're like, why do I have to give my email address for a PDF? And I'm like, because they had called it a PDF, they were because their audience is mainly techies, right?
Yep.
Who, when you position as a course, or like Nathan Barry's also very targeted towards freelancers and techies, able to sell a $60, $100 book. But as soon as they called it a PDF, everyone's like, why do I have to give my email address for a PDF, even though you're getting a $25 book for free?
Yeah. Right? And I have a problem with like calling it a book because everyone in my audience is like, I still haven't gotten it. I'm like, it's a PDF. You download
digital book. Yeah.
Right. They're like, well, it's not in the mail yet. I'm like, well, you never entered your address. So how am I supposed to send it to you?
Yeah.
But it's no matter how many words I've tried to use.
It's rough.
It's still rough. But
there's certain audiences. Like we worked with some clients who were in the frugality space.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh my God. It's hard to sell to that.
Oh,
it's like we were selling a $25 book that had if you did not make $400 from it in 6 months, you get the money back.
Yeah.
Everyone, number one complaint, too expensive.
Yep.
Like, literally free money. Like,
I mean, I have a friend who runs a site for college students. It's like, try selling to them.
Yeah.
It's a tough one.
Yeah. The college student one reminds me of, back in the day, I used to do I don't know if people remember Whereas, but essentially pirated versions like Adobe and stuff. And it took forever, right? And this is late 90s, but it took forever because you had to find the crack, you had to do all this stuff. Maybe there's viruses, you had to find the right place, you had to get the serial number, do all this stuff, and then it would update, and then you have to find the new one and everything. But I was a poor college kid. I didn't have $1,500 to spend on Photoshop.
Yeah, remember when it was that expensive?
Yeah, I know. And then I needed it for work. But then at some point, and this is their strategy really, once I graduated, I now know Photoshop. And at
Yes.
my work, I have to have Photoshop. And I don't have 30 hours to pull into getting a cracked version of Photoshop.
Yep.
I'd rather just buy the $1,500 version, or now the $60 a month or whatever it is,
Yeah.
to get their subscription.
I did the same thing. I had all the cracked versions of Photoshop, all growing up, Illustrator, all of those things, and now I pay for it.
Yep. And there are theories that was an actual strategy. If it was,
that's
kudos
brilliant.
on them.
Yes. That's
So
brilliant.
Smart.
Yeah.
Not sure if it was or not, but yeah, because now
I doubt it.
I don't know, but I don't use anything but Photoshop. And they killed it. They've absolutely decimated. There's so little else that works like Photoshop does,
Mhm.
or Illustrator, or
Mhm.
geez, even Premiere and After Effects. Premiere just killed Avid.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I mean, that's what I use Premiere. I use XD is my favorite software
I
ever
just
right
started
now.
getting into that. I like it a lot.
Yeah, it's just like I can just do things so much faster. It's kind of like it's like easy Illustrator.
Yep.
Yeah.
I wanted to go into a little bit about, so we're starting to talk about video. We're starting to
Mhm.
talk about design with XD. We've talked about copywriting.
Mhm.
It seems like you can do everything. Is that
Yeah.
so? I think there's a lot of talk about jack of all trades
Yep.
versus specialization. And as we go into the part of that authenticity, trying to kind of tamp down the things that, as you're trying to craft that who you are, tamping down the things that don't fit that image. But you seem to have taken no, I do everything. Like, this is
Yeah.
me. This is this jack of all trades. I'd love to
Mhm.
hear about that. And do you find that good, bad, a superpower? Like,
Yeah, so I do find it a superpower. I wish, weirdly, that I was just very skilled at one thing. Like I
I
wish
get that a lot.
I could play piano with my eyes closed and impress, thousands and thousands of people. I wish I could do that with guitar, or whatever. Like pick one thing and go like, wow, 10,000 hours, like virtuoso.
Mhm.
That, but I'm not that. I've never been that. I lose patience quick on things, and some things I don't. Right, and I basically try new things all the time. And this is just in my personal life too. So, for example, um, when I was a kid, I did art, I did drawing, I did karate, I did soccer, I did baseball. None of those really worked out.
Mhm.
I did music. I play guitar. My dad's like, "Hey, why don't you try guitar?" I was like, "Okay." I tried saxophone. That didn't work out for me, but I know how to play it. Let's try guitar. Cool. All of a sudden, I'm like, "Hey, I like guitar. I feel cool. This is great," and I stuck with it. And
Mhm.
that eventually led to me being in a band. And I didn't know how to sing, so I tried to sing, and I was really bad at it. But I liked doing it. I liked being the center of attention, as you can tell, probably. So like that just all kind of fit for me, and continue to do that to this day. And so I tried snowboarding. I still like that. I One time I got really in. I mean, I guess what was it, 10 years ago? I really like beer as a thing in my life. It's kind of like it's one of the reasons I moved out here to Colorado, because of beer and
Mhm.
snowboarding. Not weed, although people think it's weed, and I'm like, no, I don't do it. So I mean, every once in a while, but not really my thing. So I got into home brewing, and that really was a weird, like, there's a lot of things I'll get into and go like,
Mhm.
oh, I can be good at this and dangerous enough to get it done.
Mhm.
That one, that is a weird thing I got into, where I was like, it's insatiable. I cannot get enough information. Like every magazine,
Interesting.
every book that comes out, I will just sit there and read and brew and just drink. And yeah, I can't whet my appetite on that enough. Right. But like with doing graphic design, I sucked at it when I was a kid, and then I got better at it, and now I like it. And I'm good enough to where, like, yeah, am I a true designer? Like, no, but I can design. I know how to
Right.
use all the programs.
You can get to that 90%.
Yep. Am I a brilliant editor? No, but I do love editing videos, and I do love that whole thing. I understand how exposure works in a camera.
Mm-hmm.
I learn on demand and just enough to get the job done. And then because I have prior experience, like with broadcasting, I learned broadcasting in high school. I was on like the actual real radio for a while,
Oh, wow.
and not college radio. And so I just got, obviously not college radio. And I got bit by that bug, and I'm like, well, how do I would make my own radio shows at home before podcasting was even a thing,
Mm-hmm.
and learned, my dad owned a recording studio growing up. So I learned all about recording and audio engineering. And that was sort of, all of these things were just like, yeah, I can't be still.
Right.
I can't stay still. Everything interests me. I'll try it. Right now I'm baking sourdough. I just got into that 2 weeks ago.
I've tried that. Haven't succeeded yet.
Yeah. Sometimes they don't work. Like, one of the things that didn't work out for me was coding. I like coding. I can code, meaning like in a programming language like PHP or Python or Ruby or something like that, to make software. I can do it, but man, it just doesn't jive with me. I'm very proficient at HTML and CSS, but like JavaScript and any sort of like database,
Right.
I can do it. Again, dangerous enough, but that's pulling teeth for me. And so that's a really rough thing for me to do.
Do you find, especially when working with other people on this kind of stuff, that's more of a benefit or a detriment? Because I know on my side, there's two coins of it, right? So the benefit is when you work with someone who is a coder, you're able to say, you're knowledgeable enough to say, yeah, that looks right, or this guy has no idea what he's talking about.
Right? Oh, I know what you mean.
But with anything, with the graphic design, with the editing and stuff like that, because you have a base knowledge of it, and you can get it to that 70 or even 90% by yourself, then when someone's not up to the task. But at the other side, you then have like, well, if I do it myself, I can get it to that 90%.
Mm-hmm.
I know I shouldn't spend my time on this and should give it to someone else, but are they going to deliver? And that's kind of the balance.
Yeah. I have a story about that. The reason I am dangerous enough with code is for this exact reason. I was working at a company, and I was a part owner of a software. So I was working at a regular company doing marketing. And in that company, it was a restoration company, and my boss had internal software that we were working on, and he wanted to sell that internal software externally to other companies like his. And so he wanted me to be the marketing guy and do design for the software, and he wanted to hire a developer. And then he had another guy just kind of like, who was the knowledgeable person in project management software. So we had a knowledgeable person in project management, and then he was the owner. And so we created a sub business, and I had part ownership along with another developer and these two guys. So it was 4 of us in this company. And the company was called Simp, which I believe now is a negative term.
Negative term.
Yeah. So super glad that didn't take off. But so what happened was I was doing the front end design, and I would do all the work like they would tell you to do in the Getting Started book, because it's mostly about SaaS, is I would do all the front end work, and then the developer would hook it all up so it would work. And then we were constantly giving these demonstrations to my boss, and the product kept failing. And my boss kept going like, why does this product keep failing? And kind of yelling at me. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not sure. We'll go look into it. Kind of like being a, diplomat. And I would go back to my developer and say like, hey, this thing broke. He's like, well, what did you change? I was like, well, I didn't change anything. You are the one that had the code right before we went live with it. He's like, no, you changed something. And I'm like, And all of a sudden, the developer started to turn on me, go to my boss, and try to force me out of the company by saying that I was the one who was causing all these problems with the software. And he ended up hiring another designer under my nose. And then that designer came in thinking I was the asshole and kind of treating me like shit. And I realized that I was getting forced out by this guy. And I knew it wasn't my fault. So what I did was I started to learn code on my own time because I wanted to be able to look at his code and say, oh, well, here's why
Here's
it
why
doesn't
the
work.
issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what happened. And
invention is the mother of necessity.
Yeah.
Or
So
necessity is the mother of invention.
Yep. He was coding in procedural PHP, which, I mean, at the time there was object-oriented.
That's what there was.
Yeah. Well, no, even at this time there was object-oriented PHP.
Oh, really?
Yep. And I was like, okay, well, he's doing it outdated. And then I found out he was on drugs. And then I found out he was there's all this other stuff. And then all of a sudden designers started coming to me like, hey man, this guy is like a fuck up. And I go, okay, well, I've been kind of secretly learning code. So I know that and so I basically ended up like learning how to code and starting to take on development work and doing it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ended up running the whole company because he ended up getting fired because nothing that I did, I didn't expose him or whatever.
Right.
I just knew
it's a ticking time bomb.
It's just ticking. Yeah. I knew. Yeah. And so then it was like, oh, let's go find developers. And at that point I knew how to I would send them code and go like, let me see what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would send it back. I go, cool. All right. You're good. And I got a team of 3 developers and I was the front end guy, and that we ran the company for like a year until I left or I got laid off because the bigger company had struggles. So the whole project sort of tanked, but it's still up and running, I think. So yeah, that was the reason for that. And again, it's not, I would go home and code my own stuff because I would just that's how I learned. So at the time I was coding a social network for dogs was my side project. It was called Dog Barks with a Z. It's a terrible name, but that's how I was learning PHP.
That's awesome.
I was doing object-oriented PHP. I was buying books on it. I was just like that was my homework.
Mm-hmm.
So just so that I knew because I don't like being the dumbest person in the room.
Yeah.
And I felt that way at that company. And then I was like, no, I'm going to learn like SaaS marketing. I'm going to learn how to code. Like I want to know every piece of this because I need to be the most valuable employee.
Right.
And so that's what happened. And now I know it. And yeah, it's definitely been a help. And it's definitely we're doing software now, and I've done software projects with other people. Like I know when the code's bad, and I know the best, and but I know how things are done. I know what I know what an MVC is. I know how it all works. There's actually stuff on MoneyLab where you can. I tried to build software in Ruby in 60 days, and I drove myself insane because I had to learn Git. I had to learn all this other stuff, and
it just keeps getting more, the ecosystem just keeps getting more complicated.
It does. And at the time, like I had a 60-day timeline to do this software project with APIs. And it was just like, this is way out of my pay grade. I don't understand this. But again, got me to be a very I can read it. I feel like Steve Jobs could do this, because Steve Jobs wasn't a programmer, but I think he could appreciate, if Wozniak was like, here's how I programmed it, it's like, okay, that makes, it's like you kind of understand how programming works. And I think it's been, I think it's good to have in every aspect. And that's the way I sort of process things out in my company too, where I will do it first, right? So if we're going to do a Pinterest strategy, or we're going to do a podcasting strategy, or a video production strategy, or a writing, whatever it is, I will do it soup to nuts.
Right.
And then I will write everything that I do down, and I will find the bottlenecks, and I'll know, like I kind of look at it from like a 10,000 foot view and say, well, Matt, you're the bottleneck in the writing process because you hate writing. Okay. So, but this process, or this part of the process, somebody else could do that, or, here's a faster way to do it. And so I constantly look at the steps in every single process because I do it the whole thing all the way through sloppily, terribly, right? And then go, okay, who could do this better, and where's the bottlenecks, and how do we make this faster? And that's when you start looking for, that's when software really comes into play, when you have a process and you go, will software make this? Yeah. Will this make it faster and better, or will it just add another tool in the toolbox?
And this is something I learned when I was working as a salaryman back in the day, is that that's the right way to do it, which is you create the process by doing it manually first.
Yeah.
If you create a process from the top down, that has no input on the actual doing of it, you're not
Mm-hmm.
going to create a good process. And what happened at that company was that we had someone who really liked making SOPs and really liked making
Yeah.
rules for
Right.
other people. And so
Yeah.
what happened was he would write out this SOP of how it should work, and it didn't work that way because that's
Right.
not how you talk to people, or that's not how the system works, or like all this stuff. And so for us at SegMetrics, we actually do all our processes manually first
Mm-hmm.
until we're like, okay, we have this down,
Yeah.
or we
You've
don't
beat
want
it
to
up
do
so much that
right.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then we can start automating it.
Yep. Or yeah, and that's the thing. Like somebody needs to see it all the way through. I think soup to nuts because, and I love that phrase.
That's a good
Soup to
phrase.
nuts. But I say it all the time. But it's, and that's the thing. Like I just happen to be able to do all those things. I don't know if I'm trying to think of a thing that I don't. Well, okay, I don't know how to do Facebook ads. Like I just completely, I'm miffed by it. But if I sat down and did it, like I'm sure with enough education, like I'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to eventually create maybe a Facebook ads process. Well, okay, I know nothing, but I have friends who know some stuff, and I know where to search and figure things out. And so I will just kind of plow my way through this process and break a bunch of stuff and ruin things and mess up and eventually find something that's kind of working, but then I'll just keep working at it to get
Yeah.
better and better. And I do this with home brewing. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of home brewers that I don't really know that many, to be honest with you, but a lot of the ones that I watch on YouTube or follow on blog posts and stuff, and just like know from the industry, they brew a bunch of different beers.
Mm-hmm.
They just hey, this week it's a brown ale, next week it's an IPA, following week it's a stout. Where the way that I homebrew is I do the same recipe every goddamn time because my goal is to make it. It's like
Perfect.
it's kind of like refining and making it like that process perfect. I have every step written down to the minute, and I constantly look at that process and go like, what if I moved the grain from this side of the garage to the other side of the garage? How many seconds does that shave off my entire day?
Right. And it's interesting because looking at the home brewing, the sourdough, and even the SEO, these are all things that you have a lot of time between the experiment and the result.
Mm-hmm.
And they also all rely on something that is not 100% in your control.
Right.
And it's really interesting because those, for me, are the things that drive me nuts because they are the hardest to test. Like even for me, grilling a steak, I want to really do like 20 steaks and like figure out exactly how to do it.
But there's so many variables.
There's so many variables.
Every steak is different. The temperature of the day, the heat of the grill, how much propane. It's it constantly changes.
And especially when you're looking at 3 to 6 months
mm-hmm.
for all of those, for SEO,
mm-hmm.
for sourdough, and for brewing.
Yeah,
there's what did you do back then? And you have to be meticulous about your note keeping or your note taking and your data analysis at the end.
And too, like even with sourdough that I'm doing now, which has only been a couple of weeks, but I've done 4 loaves and each one came out completely different.
Mm-hmm.
None of them failed. They were all bread. So I was like, okay, but then I'm sitting there going, I look at it and go, I want this result. And so I will go and look up specifically what causes that result. And then that will be the variable I test next time, knowing that all the variables may change and the temperature may change in the day. And like, there's other variables that are out of my control,
mm-hmm.
but I can control that one and test that one and see if that works. But I'm not, again, like even with Money Lab, none of my experiments or challenges are scientific or rooted in the scientific method. It's a kind of an art form in a way. It's
right.
You know what I mean?
And that's, I think, the benefit of it. And that's the benefit of Money Lab, which is that as you go through the process, you're not saying this works, do this. You're saying these were the conditions at which I tried this and this was the result. Right.
Yes, exactly. In that moment in time.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And to speak about SEO specifically, because there is a philosophy that is different than a process, right? And that I do hold. I held philosophies about homebrewing as well, and I stick within my own philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And that philosophy is kind of like stretchy, and it can move, and it can break. And I kind of operate in that little bubble, right? But it's not a process,
Right.
and I do the same thing with, I think like a part of my SEO philosophy is that page speed is important, right? And it's just a thing. I believe it's important to have your sites load incredibly fast. And here's all the reasons why I think that, because I have all this research. But that's just my philosophy. I don't believe, that's a tactic that I'm going to employ. I believe that you should go big or go home. I think what I do at Money Lab or what I do at all my sites is I don't go for long tail keywords. I go for the keyword, the big one. I call it, I'm like workshopping an idea to call it. I'm calling it the Moonshot Technique, which is like shoot for the moon and land in the stars. The idea of like, you go and you write and you create for the big keyword, knowing it's kind of impossible. But in that effort, you will have hit all of these smaller keywords that you would have never have researched and picked.
Right. It's a discovery thing. Right?
Yeah. It's like you could call it go big or go home or whatever. That's a philosophy that I employ myself. And whenever I do an SEO experiment, that's what I'm using. I operate within that philosophy, but then the process is the more like, oh, okay, go to Ahrefs, search for X, then go into WordPress, make sure the light's green in Yoast or whatever. Those are the individual pieces of it, the technical side of it. But then there's like an overarching philosophy of the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, Matt, thank you so much for spending the time with us and for giving us this expertise. And honestly, looking at this authenticity, I think it's so important as we kind of move into this next stage of marketing, which I think we're getting into a new generation of marketers and a new style of marketing. So happy to have you on this. People can check you out at Money Lab. And where else can people find you on the internet?
Honestly, just go to moneylab.co. That's where the synergy is. I can't believe I just used that word.
Synergy for the win.
Yes.
All right, Matt. Thank you so much. And stay healthy, stay safe.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks. You too.
Cheers.